Hey friends and foes, welcome to Brushwork Podcast. My name is Stephanie Scott, and today is Art Book Club. On Art Book Club, we are reading Advice on Painting from John Singer Sargent, which is by Thomas Jefferson Kitts. It's a short PDF. It's annotated based on a book that's in the Creative Commons. So it's a little bit of a different style book today. On the podcast, I've got my friend and book club co-host, Visual Nomad, also known as Jennifer, and we're going to chat about this book live on Twitch. If you're interested in coming to the live shows of this podcast, every second Sunday on Twitch is when book club is. It's at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and I'd love to see you there. Without further ado, here's our book club. Friends and foes, welcome to Art Book Club. Today on Book Club, we read this last month, Advice on Painting from John Singer Sargent. And this is a PDF that was based on the book about John Singer Sargent, called John Sargent, that's in the public domain. So if you're like, I want to read the original version without all the notes, that's a possibility. It's, I'll put a link somewhere, probably in the show notes, about where to find that. But this PDF was written by Thomas Jefferson Kitts, who is a living painter who does a lot of really brilliant landscape paintings. And he had this, John Singer Sargent was his, big inspiration in life. And he's like, I got to learn more about this artist. He made him want to be a landscape painter and also do portraiture. And was like, there's nothing really there. Because at the time, Sargent had been kind of out of favor in the academic scene. At least that's what he wrote in his introduction for this book. And so I saw this PDF and I was like, this is interesting. I think we should read it for Art Book Club. So that's what we read this month. On Art Book Club today, I have my friend and often co-host for Art Book Club. This is Visual Nomad. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Visual Nomad is an abstract oil painter as well, and we've been reading books together for, I think this is our 7th book. Art Book Club has been going for at least half a year now, and that feels pretty good.
Going strong.
We're going strong. We both read this book this morning. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, thank you for the bits, yes. Jonathan. I appreciate all those very cute corgis. This is my second read through of this PDF. I read it first, 8 years ago, something like a long time ago. But I was like, I just want a refresher because I had seen some of Sargent's paintings recently on a quick trip I took. And I was like, okay, these are pretty sexy. So I gotta read more about them again.
Yes.
Yeah. So far, what did you think of this little booklet?
I thought it was a great insight. So when I hear John Singer Sargent, mm-hmm. I tend to have this knee-jerk reaction of rolling my eyes back in my head.
What?
Not because of who he is, but because of people's reaction to him as a painter. It's like, oh, do you know Sargent? Whenever you tell people you're a painter. And you're like, yes, I freaking know Sargent. If I don't know Sargent, there's something wrong with me. Because he's up there with Warhol as far as painters are concerned. But I love his work. And like you said, around the 80s, he fell out of favor. My guess is because you had people like Keith Haring and Basquiat and Andy Warhol and all of them that were really, really strong in the art scene. And it was very different. It was ready-made, abstract, Duchamp had run ravage through art and basically undone every tenet of art at that point. And they were trying to figure out where we were going to land, but it was very abstract and very pop culture at that point.
Traditionalism was kind of thrown away.
Yeah. But I really liked it. I think there is a lot to glean from Sargent. More than just, oh, this is a technique. There's some really strong core painter values that I think we can pull from him in any discipline. that are wonderful. So I thought that was really good to get from this.
I thought that was good too. I love his work, and I feel like any teacher I had when I was like in high school would tell me that he was too romantic in a sense, where like his portraits are very, they have a lot of beauty in them. That. Yeah. And so I was often told to not look at his work as a reference. But as I got older, I was like, oh, but these are really magical. Like, I feel like he's almost unanimously liked by people who do like realism. And just like the light that comes from his portraits are just, they're so good. And he has some really great, just like technical advice in this little booklet, but also, you know, just like attitudes around painting that I think are pretty inspiring. Yeah. And I also really liked Kit's annotations of this book. In the book, it's like kind of excerpts from Sargent's book on the right side, and then Kit has his own notes about the book on the left in red for the majority of this little booklet. And I feel like it, when I would read the part about Sargent, and then I would read the little annotations, it was just like, they were perfectly done, perfectly balanced. I was like, yes, tell me about what this like third person like narrator from the sky is telling me about Sargent. And it was very, I don't know, just like approachable.
Right, because I think it felt more of like a group discussion in that manner, because it wasn't just pull quotes from Sargent himself, but it was quotes and interactions that his students had with him, with some of his peers. It was really good. It was like this generational conversation in this piece, which was really nice.
Yeah.
To see how he's spanned the ages, like the fact that he kind of disappeared from his age to some extent. I mean, he wasn't able to show in Paris because of the one piece that he created that he considers his masterpiece, which is unbelievable to me that he stood on that and was like, fine, I don't care. You know, the damage had already been done. And then he came back and was like, I'll paint the strap on her, you know?
Yeah.
So this lady had this very, what we would call a cocktail dress today, which would look normal on anybody right now. But back then, for them to show any skin or anything like that,
scandalous.
It was scandalous, you know. And he didn't say her name, but he had made such a striking likeness of her that everybody knew who she was. And she was an aristocracy, and she didn't care, and he didn't care. And it was just kind of this like, okay, well, he painted her dress with the strap halfway down her shoulder on the one side. She wasn't showing anything, but it was the suggestiveness of this piece. And they were, the French of all people, shall we say, astoundingly were very prudish in that respect. And we're like, no, we can't have this. You're out.
Right.
But yeah, so then at that point he had to basically move to England and settle down in England and create a studio in England and in America. And so it's just like, yeah, it's fascinating to see that he's kind of suffered a couple artistic deaths in his whole run of things.
Just based on his reputation, right? So this is the Madame X piece that we were talking about here. And
yes.
her...
So the strap on the left-hand side was halfway down her shoulder on that arm. And it kind of added to the angularity of the piece and kind of led you out. Yes, so that strap there was actually painted along the side. Yeah, towards... And it ran at the same angle as her neck. And so it kind of drew you out of the piece and kind of pulled you in. And so, yeah, it was just... It's fascinating to see that he has such a strong following today in light of all of these different movements that have come through and some of the judgments against him, you know? Like you said, your teacher was like, yeah, it's too romanticized, you know? And I can see that, but I'm like, the mark making in these pieces is absolutely astounding. his grasp on, like, they were talking about tone and value and how he tweaked that and was so good at that. And that's really what makes his pieces so beautiful. It's not just, oh, this is a landscape. It's the light in it is just, like you said, it's magical. It's
so good.
Really something that he's done. Like, I would love to be able to pick his brain, honestly.
Right? He didn't have very many students. He only had a couple, and he was reluctant to take them. I feel like a core lesson he taught throughout this, I'm going to pull up this image again, was to simplify was one of the major, like, advices he gave, but also to kind of let an image kind of, to change the contour of edges, to dramatize what you want to come forward and what you want people to pay attention to, and soften what you don't. So, like, here on the woman's brow, it's very sharp, her hairline is very sharp, but then you, like, look down to her neck here, which just kind of fades into her dress, and you can see it here, and it's just like, where are you looking? Well, you're not looking at the chair, really. I mean, you kind of do, but you look here, you look at her hands, and then you look around. And I think it's such a hard thing to learn how to do. And like this side of her neck versus this side of her neck, and like this kind of like shape. Oh, she's so beautiful. And that's tough. I feel like as you and I can get pretty hard-edged on our paintings, on our abstract work.
Sure.
And it's a tool that we are using as abstracts. But when you're doing realistic paintings, I feel like that's even more important to know when to put in an edge and when to put in something that's soft, and when to have two colors that are really contrasty, and when you have two colors that are just, they're so similar that you can barely tell the difference. And that's kind of delicious.
Yeah, I think, because, I mean, that was one thing that when I sat down to read this, my thought is, as an abstract painter, how does this relate to me? It's such a different, it's such a juxtaposition to what you and I do, to some extent, that it's like, I don't know. I mean, I strive to get more loose in my brushwork as time goes on, because when I started, I was very tight, very contained, very, like, even in that abstraction, it was very figurative, almost realistic, you know. And now I feel like I'm trying to loosen that up, and there are struggles in that, but like, to see some of the things that he's done, and I'm like, oh, I guess I could apply that, like, inside those. For those of you that haven't seen my work, a lot of my pieces are broken up into smaller squares, rectangles, shapes. I've taken an image and basically shattered it and piled it on top of itself. So there's some semblance of the thing that's there, but also there's shifting and stuff there as well. So like the edge thing, I see the use of that in those shards, because there are hidden edges on those, or vanishing edges, as they would say.
Yeah.
And then a harder edge. And how do I work with that to give pieces depth, so that it's not just a, like, very two-dimensional, non-fragmented piece. And yeah, just like even the work that's inside of those shapes, it's still somewhat realistic in its rendering, so I can still use some of this this technique inside of that space. It's like, how do I adapt that when it's not this, I shouldn't say photorealistic, but very
in realism,
yes, of something.
When I look at my art, like I'm looking at the one behind me, and I have definitely some soft edges. Like, when you get up close with my artwork, all of it's hard edged, like all of it. But when you look at it from afar, from 12 feet away, there are some very soft aspects to it. And I think learning to wield that in a sense is really important. I see the hard edge going straight down the middle, the diamond in the center where the circle meets the gold. It's all of it's on purpose, but it's like, okay, could I have like this one right here? There we go. That line, could that line have been softer versus like that one, which is super soft? Like, could I have like eased the whole thing around better? It's interesting.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And where is balance, and where do you decide to put those hard edges to create some sort of emotional impact when you are making your work, or visual impact, I guess, in its least form, but it's delicate. It's delicate. Yeah.
And also lead somebody around the piece as well in that space, which is even harder because it's like, okay, I want to do this, but it's like, does that lead people through the piece the way that I want it to? And that's an ongoing struggle.
It is. It's like, where do you want them to look first? And then what sort of shape do you want to lead their eye in? And that sort of composition. Abstract art's so hard.
Yeah.
Anyways, one of my favorite things he talks about in the very beginning of this book is how when a new student will come to Sargent, and Sargent will be like, okay, let me see your palette and your brushes. And I'm very curious. I think I might have asked you this before, but never on this podcast. So how do you lay out your palette? Like, do you have, like, how many colors do you have out at once when you work on a painting? Are they the same colors every painting? What order do you lay out your paints, like from left to right? Like, get granular.
So the way I used to lay out my palette when I started a couple years ago is not anywhere near what I do now because I've gotten some help. And so I've gotten a little bit of understanding of color theory inside of this. Now, my base colors, they've been almost the same since the very beginning. I gravitated to a set of colors and I'm able to create what I need out of that. Now, I'm adding a couple different colors, one for transparency, another one so that I can, get the kind of purples that I want. In some respects, I can't just do red and blue. It won't give me that purple that I'm looking for. I need more of like a violet or something like that I can really use with it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been so from left to right.
Yeah.
Let's see what is on the left. The left is alizarin crimson. Then it goes cad red, cad orange, cad yellow, azo yellow, cad lemon yellow, which is like a blue shifted yellow, white. Then it goes to, I think I do ultramarine blue, Prussian blue, and phthalo blue, and then I've got Viridian for my green. And that's along the top, and then in the bottom right hand corner is where I do my darks. So I'll have my burnt umber down there, and that's where I'll make my black.
Yeah.
And my dark purples and my dark blues. That will happen down there. So, yeah, that's kind of how I lay things out.
In this book, Sargent's like, pour a lot of color, like enough for 12 paintings. How much color do you pour for each paint, like, color that you have down? Is it like a dime? Is it like a quarter? Like, what? Give me a size estimate of how much paint you put down.
I'd probably say a nickel's worth, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's usually there for more than one painting, depending on what I'm doing. The white I go through quite a bit.
When did you,
as you go along, paint. Go ahead.
Where did you learn to put white in the middle of your palette?
That was from my mentor.
Yeah.
He's like, you put white in the middle. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, because it all like kind of comes back to white. So, and you can tint from the center. it's kind of like how you separate your colors down.
Mm-hmm.
Your warms are on one side, your cools are on the other,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of work your way through it. So, yeah, but it works out really well because I end up, like, I had white in my right-hand corner.
Yes.
And I would have to, like, pull it across, and I'm like, that's so annoying. Like, why? And, like, when I started mixing color was vastly different than what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was kind of taught how to paint and kind of not. So graphic design was my major in college. So I took a painting class, but that's all I took. And it wasn't the greatest painting class. So it's like there were a lot of things that were missed. But like how I mix down colors is different now than what I did before. I know some people do a lot of pre-mixing. I used to do a little bit of that, but now I do more mixing on the fly than what I did before.
That's interesting.
So, yeah.
Nice. On my palette, it also depends on what I'm painting. Like if I'm out doing a landscape, I do it very differently than when I'm doing an abstract. So lately when I do my abstracts, I have a big old pile of white also in the middle. And I didn't learn that until I met artists from overseas. And I met some just like some students from Europe that had been like visiting Seattle. And I was like, oh, you do it like this? And they're like, yeah, because your arm travels fewer space to like get to your color. Anyways, genius. Went through like 4 years of art school before I learned that. Anyways,
Right.
when I do my abstracts now, I pour like probably a quarter worth size dollop of color, and I'm using super limited. I pull like 3 pigments, and they're never the same per painting. So it's like in my Link painting I just did, I had a phthalo blue, the alizarin crimson, and a sap green, and then I think a yellow, like it's like really pale yellow. I forgot what it was called, but usually it's like 3 to 4 colors plus a white, and sometimes a black, not normally. But I found that when I had more colors on my palette all the time, my colors were just getting like all over the place. Like I had no self-control. I'm like, this one looks delicious. Let's just add a little bit of that into here. Like I'm like, I need like guardrails on the bowling ball lane that is my brain.
Yeah, I hear that.
So that's how I've been doing it lately, and I like it.
Yeah.
And I used to be so just like, I used to pour like the tiniest like ½ inch of a squirt, like enough to like put toothpaste on your toothbrush amount of paint, like. But like,
right.
And then I would have to constantly be repouring it. But now I'm like, I have extra paint canvases. Nothing's going to waste. I used to keep paint in the freezer, but I just don't need to anymore. But that's what I've been doing lately, and it's working out right now. We'll see if things change in the next 10 years.
Right. Yeah.
Now I want to ask you about the other aspect, which was, he says to use really thick brushes with like big brushes with a lot of resistance in the brush. Do you like that kind of brush for your work?
Okay. So, yeah, I use a flat by Rosemary & Co. It is a synthetic flat.
You got the fancy ones.
And it's got... See, that's funny you say that because they're actually cheaper than my Winsor & Newton brushes.
Are they really?
Which is really funny, yeah. They are some of the cheaper brushes that I've bought, and they're way better made, which is really funny. Which I didn't think that would be the case because I actually had to order them from England.
Yeah.
I do have somebody here in the States that does sell them, but they don't carry all of them. They only carry certain ones, and they didn't have my size 0 flat that I really, really wanted. So
they're not easy to find.
Fine. I'm just gonna put in a whole order from England. Fine.
I keep thinking I want to buy one of their watercolor travel sets. They have them in like these little like bullet containers. They're so cool, and I'm like,
right.
That's just fun. Okay, but tell me more.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I like a little bit of snap with mine. And because you and I do somewhat similar stuff in the respect of we have very hard edges with stuff, very fine lines. I really like mine to be like super razor sharp.
Yeah.
And Rosemary's the only one that I've seen that's really held that edge. Because I've even gotten like my Winsor and Newton brushes, geez, I got those brand new and they don't even have an edge to them in their flats.
Right?
And I'm like, what? I'm like, so basically they crimp them down too much. And basically what happens is they splay out. Because they've crimped them too hard.
Yeah.
Instead of like, but that's a whole artist rant. Anyways, we're not going to go there.
I mean,
but yeah, I like a good snap. I like a good snap to my brush. I'm kind of heavy-handed, so my brushes are probably a bit more springier now than they should be, or less springy than they should be because I beat them up.
Yeah.
But when you first get them, oh, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
I'm finding that the paintbrushes I have now, I could probably buy different ones because they last me about 5 paintings before they start splitting down the middle, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't like this.
Paintbrush maintenance. Oh, that's a whole different story in and of itself.
I know. Maybe I'm gonna have you on the podcast to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I do some wizardry and magic that I've learned through trial and error.
Cool.
I'll be more than willing to share my info at some point. But yeah,
heck yeah,
it's work. It's work.
So good. Are there any quotes from this little booklet that you liked? You want to share?
Let me see. Not that I am marked any. I think what struck me most about Sargent, and I think it just goes to show as artists, like you talked about how he didn't take on many students because he didn't really feel like he could teach very well. Which is really funny considering how well known and how renowned he was for his skill.
Yeah.
I mean, he became a very wealthy person because he was such a good painter. But yeah, like the fact that he had this insecurity about him. I don't know if it kind of gives me comfort to know that those moments that I have some hesitation.
Yeah.
That it's okay. Like, I'm not the only one that feels that way. And that it's a process that's never ending because he's constantly learning it. When you read the piece, you'll see that he's constantly learning and evolving and growing in his craft. And even he, when he'd paint, he would beat himself up. Like, people could hear him mumble things under his breath about, oh, well, so-and-so wouldn't have done this. It's just like, what are you talking about?
We love an art rival.
Right. But it's like, it's just, he was just as aware of the painters that came before him and lived during his time. And that comparison, sans social media, was still there. That comparison in artists is still there for whatever reason. Be it just, struggling to make ends meet and trying to make a living of it. That's part of it, But yeah, just that. And what was I thinking? Like, craft wise, just like he's like, I'll teach you fundamentals, but the rest of it is going to have to be you. Yeah. Like, he didn't believe in those rigid rules, but he still fought with himself about that. Because he would be like, well, my teacher told me this, XYZ. And that's kind of why I do this way, And was it Velasquez.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Velasquez. People were like questioning Velasquez's influences on him, and they like pointing out a million different things that to the very last painting he did purely because of Velasquez's influence on him. And it's like, I think we constantly as artists fight our way out of that box, but continue to put ourselves in another box after we've fought out of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just so ingrained in us. Like, no, this is like, we hear those lessons. No, this is what we do. No, you're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to do this.
Yep.
It's like, he always was encouraging of people finding their own method inside of that, which was wonderful. Even though he struggled with it, he was able to see it enough to go, now I'm going to tell you this, but you need to find what works for you, And like in plein air, you paint plein air, it is vastly different than your studio process because one, dry times are different. How your setup is completely different because of your outside. It's a very condensed studio, so to speak, that you take with you. And so even in that, there's two different methods that you use to paint in some respects.
Yeah.
Because it's, different
Super
type.
different.
You're painting landscapes as opposed to, more of an abstract piece. It's more of a, impressionistic or realistic piece. So, yeah, that's kind of what I took away from it, which was profound in and of itself.
It's so fun, and it's gosh, he's just such a cool painter, and I just want to look at his art all the time.
Mm-hmm. I know, right?
One thing that kind of stood out to me at the end was he was working on a painting. This is kind of gets a bit narrative here, and he was working on a painting, and he's been working on it he had 16 sessions on it or something, and finally he was like, hey, I need you to bring your husband over because I can't figure this out, and there's something about painting opals that just freaks me out. and he knew that the sitter and her husband were musicians, and so the husband came by and just played some music, and suddenly Sargent had it in 3 sessions. What he was just like, I got it, I know how to do this, and and boom, the painting was done. What are some things for you that kind of, outside of looking at art and doing art, help your artwork happen?
Well, oddly enough, I have, especially with this crunch of trying to get the business off the ground and doing all that's involved with that, I've learned how valuable just taking time to decompress, doing something. And my thing has been, I just play some video games here and there.
Heck yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll take breaks between the work and be like, okay, let's watch a video, or let's play a game, do something other, to just completely shift my brain out of that space, because it does get overwhelming.
Yeah.
Music is another thing that I love. I just put music on and listen and hang out.
It's so good.
Yeah. How about you?
It's good for your soul. I took about 2 weeks off of streaming recently, and doing some traveling was really fun. That I feel always refreshes me, even if it's just a day trip. But in the short term, I feel audiobooks really help me out. There's something about listening to a story that gets me into abstract art. I don't know why. I think I've trained my brain for this, because before I would stream and paint at the same time, I would just audiobook and paint, and I did that for 4 years. It's just I don't know. It takes me out of my brain, and I just am painting in tune. I don't know. It's something with the story that helps me out. It's fun. It's cute.
Yeah, I love to have music on when I'm painting, so I completely understand that.
I joke lately that my new favorite music is Lo-Fi Girl, because I listen to her so much on stream. Just every time.
It's good. It's good because it's not necessarily I like stuff that's got words. I listen to rap and hip hop and
Delicious.
all that. But I mean, it's a vast gamut. I mean, I listen to video game music that doesn't have any words to it, and then I'll listen to that, which is very wordy. So I think it kind of depends what mood I'm in. You know, sometimes it's classical, sometimes it's old 50s songs or whatever, you know, it just depends.
Fabulous. Yeah, any final thoughts on this book? Overall, I thought it was great, and I'm giving it for what it was, a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I thought there's more on the bone to this than some of the other stuff that I've read, honestly. If you really sit with it and work, I think, like you said, you know, you read through it a couple times. I think I need to read through it maybe a couple more times, because I think there's more there to it. You know, some of the quotes that they have from Sargent, they don't strike you at first.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of one of those things where it's like you have to read it so that it's in your brain. So when you're in the process of doing something and that comes to mind, you're like, oh, that's what he meant by that.
Exactly.
Oh, now that makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
So, like, I think there's going to be a lot of those moments in this. So, like you said, I think it's a 4 out of 5, at least, you know, for what it is.
Yeah.
Because for as short as it is, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
I recommend, if you liked this PDF, checking out Kit's blog. He's got many entries. Okay. He hasn't updated it lately, but he's had just like years and years of writing about art. And also he's just a fantastic painter himself. So that's also fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good times. Yeah. Anything else, or can I tell you the next book?
Next book would be wonderful.
All right. So the next book we read for October is gonna be, where did I put? Boom. All right. It's called The Creative Habit by Twyla Tharp, I think is how her name is said.
Okay. Right.
The subtitle is Learn It and Use It for Life. And I found this book when I was adventuring through Portland, and it's, let me read the back for you. All it takes to make creativity a part of your life is a willingness to make it a habit. In this product of preparation and effort, it is within reach for everyone. Whether you're a painter, musician, business person, or simply an individual yearning to put your creativity to use, the Creative Habit provides you with 32 practical exercises based on the lessons Tharp has learned in her remarkable career. She's written many books, and they have like really fun titles like Where's Your Pencil? And Coins and Chaos. And I'm like, these are so good. I haven't read this. This will be my first read through, but I thought it looked interesting. And we could use a book about habits and mindset and things like that. So we'll read that for our October meeting. And then, so this book will be the last book that we talk about this year. We're going to do one more meeting in October, and then we'll take November and December off, where I will tell you the next book we read for January, but you'll have 2 months to read it. So that'll be nice. And
yes.
Yeah, good times. Oh man, I love reading books. Books are so good. They're just good for my soul.
I've appreciated this because, like, I want to read more, but, like, I get so sidetracked by so many other things, and it's like...
Honestly.
It's nice to, like, have something that I didn't necessarily have to pick out, but I know that I'll really enjoy. Be like, oh, I've got... And have a deadline for it. So that there's a little bit of a push, but it's not like, oh, I'm going to beat you over the head with this deadline. It's, no, you know, read it and enjoy it. And so... It's kind of nice that I'm like, oh, okay, what's this month's book? Let's read this book, you know?
Da-da-da. I am your personal artistic curated library at your service.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. My shelf doesn't appreciate it, but I appreciate it.
Thank you again so much to Visual Nomad for joining me today on the podcast. If you're interested in reading this book, I have a link to it in the show notes. You can also get it by subscribing to Kit's website, which is very cool. And thanks Thomas Kitts for writing this. I appreciate it. We had a lot of fun talking about it. Next Art Book Club book will be The Creative Habit by Twyla Tharp. You can find that on Goodreads, and I'm excited to talk about it. Make good choices, everyone, and see you next time. Goodbye!